Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Concrete Keeping It Real. Today, we have an incredible guest by the name of Dr. Kathy. She's a mother, a doctor, an older sister, an auntie, and we brought you onto the show because you deserve your flowers. You deserve for your testimony to be heard. Because there's little girls out there who went through, who is going to what you're went through, and they probably don't know where to go or who to run to.
Right.
But they need to hear your story, that in the midst of what you went through in your past, you became a doctor. And before I start with this show, I would like to tell you happy birthday,
Oh, thank
because
you.
your birthday just passed.
Thank you.
So let's get the audience to know, who is Dr. Kathy? Where does she come from?
Thank you. Well, thank you for having me. It's my pleasure being on here. I don't know where to start.
Talk. That's why we're here.
So I'm a licensed mental health therapist. I actually knew I wanted to be a therapist since I was probably 13. Always knew I wanted to be a therapist. Always knew I wanted to change lives, impact lives, in whatever capacity that looked like.
At 13?
13. I already knew what I wanted to do.
How did you know? How did you just know you wanted to change lives at the age of 13? Because at the age of 13, I was just probably thinking about video games, and you were just way ahead of the curve.
Yeah, I think spiritually, I've always been in tune with myself and in my higher power, and I knew that everything was beyond who I was specifically, but rather my impact on this world. Like I knew I was here to serve a greater purpose than I could far comprehend at the time. And so as I got older and I started going through my own trials and tribulations and experiences and what some may call traumatic experiences, I learned I wanted to understand myself better, but I also wanted to understand the people that cause those traumas as well.
Let's lay a foundation. Where were you being raised at this time?
I was raised in Miami Gardens.
Miami Gardens. Carol City at that time.
Yeah,
or
Murder Gardens.
Murder Gardens. Murder Gardens. And what school did you attend?
At the time, I was back and forth between different schools, between Miami Lakes Middle. Then I graduated from Jam Man, so I kicked out of Miami Lakes and went to Jam Man, which is essentially like an opportunity middle school.
Right.
So they send all the kids that get kicked out of schools to this one school.
So you went to an alternative school.
Alternative school.
Why did you get kicked out of school? What caused you to go to alternative school?
I think I was a angry little girl with suppressed traumas and anger and pain and hurt, and I didn't have a healthy outlet at the time to even begin to express what I was going through, to be able to understand what I was experiencing. And I think that translated into anger, and so it led to physical fights, physical altercations, a lot of bullying. And it wasn't bullying that I was being bullied, I was bullying other people.
You were the bully.
I was the bully.
Wow.
I was the bully. Mm-hmm. And if people hear my story today, they would be surprised, because I'm the complete opposite of who that little hurt, little broken girl was.
So let's take it back. Let's dive in deeper. What caused you to be the bully at that time? Because some people do want to know what goes inside of a mind of a bully. I've never been a bully, but you could correct me if I'm wrong. I used to think a bully was a person that was kind of insecure with themselves, and they needed to show some kind of bravado to please, to show everybody else who they were, but really inside they were struggling with something.
Absolutely. Hurt people hurt people.
Hurt people hurt
people hurt people.
So you kind of agree with that assessment I just gave?
Absolutely. I think we have different reasons why people bully others, or why people choose to hurt others. I think sometimes it could be, especially in, let's say, adolescence stage of life, sometimes it's things that they're going on at home, like suppressed emotions, suppressed pain, suppressed hurt. Like sometimes these children are being misunderstood, or they're not given a space to actually voice their concerns or feelings, or they're dealing with an overly critical parent who's constantly nagging and saying, you always doing this, you always doing that, and not really giving them the space to thrive or to be heard or be
So
understood.
how did your parents handle that? Because I know when you were going through what you were going through, getting in trouble, getting kicked out of school, your parents had to get involved. How did that dynamic, daughter parent relationship, how did that play out?
I think naturally they handled it the best way that they could, but it was a lot of um, punishment, a lot of disciplinary action, sometimes verbal abuse, sometimes physical abuse with the bell, with the rod, with the stick, with
Mm-hmm.
whatever they could find. You know, I remember one time I got beat with the belt and I ran
Right.
outside of the house. And at the time we were building like this concrete wall around our house. And my dad jumped in there in the 6 foot deep hole that
Right.
they had and beat my ass.
Listen, but
And so we laugh about it, but it's physical abuse. And
do
it's
you
physical
true?
abuse.
Because I could relate, because I could remember me hiding under the bed and getting hit by the belt buckles.
Yeah, that was normal.
Yeah, that's what I
That
want to.
was
That's why
normal at
I
the
could
time.
relate, and
Yeah.
I know we hear physical abuse. I want to say is borderline physical abuse when you're hitting them a certain way, but nevertheless, I believe in do not spare the rod,
Okay.
because I believe this is my belief. And our belief
Absolutely.
may
Everybody
be
got different
yes,
beliefs.
yes, yes.
Yeah.
And I believe that when it comes to kids, and especially nowadays, you can lose them so fast.
Mhm.
But every kid
Yep.
need to be disciplined in a different way, because you have to know your child.
I agree.
Because one may be you can voice to one, and one you may have to be physical with one. Because if you don't, the police will, and they will take your child away from you.
Mhm.
So some type of fear, not fear, but some type of place that they need to know that you're the parents.
Yeah. I don't disagree with spare the rod,
Mhm.
spoil the child, that concept, that logic, but it doesn't always necessarily mean being
I
physically
agree.
abusive.
I agree with you.
Right? There's a difference between you disciplining a child and hitting them versus actually beating them till they're bleeding. That is physical abuse.
Yes, that is.
And a lot of
Yes,
times
that
in the
is.
Caribbean and African American populations,
They cut
we're
skin.
used to
Yeah.
getting physically abused. And we
Yes.
call it, my mama used to beat my ass.
Yes.
You
Yes.
know, your mom and dad used to
Abuse you.
physically abuse you, but we are afraid to actually say that out loud.
Right.
And we actually make jokes. I was just telling them earlier.
Right.
We actually make jokes about it. My mom used to beat my ass. It's physical abuse.
You right.
It is what it is.
You right.
And so what this does and how it affects people in adulthood is it suppresses our emotions. Then we learn, okay, well, I am in pain and I don't have a safe place to actually voice my feelings, voice how I'm feeling about certain situations that made me angry or made me upset. Or perhaps sometimes, how many times can you recall getting your ass beat and you're like, I didn't even do nothing?
Millions of times.
You didn't even
Millions of
understand what
times.
you were getting your ass beat for.
Millions of times.
Yeah.
It occurred. So did that push you away from your household? Did that push you away from your parents? Because it sounded like you had strict parents that were like, I can remember my parents, and I can speak for myself. They were hardline parents that I'm the parent, you're the child. I know what's best for you. You had no other options. You do what I say.
Absolutely.
You under my household. Were your parents like that?
My mom was like the complete opposite of who my dad was. So
Okay.
my dad was that kind of parent. My mom was like very laid back,
Right.
very like you could just do anything. She was like that parent that you
Right.
could like get over on. Whereas my father, he was very much
Hardline.
person. Yeah, he was like, I don't care what you got to say. This is what it is. My house, my rules. That's what it is. And so when you're dealing with a parent who's not really listening to you voicing your concerns or how you feel, or they're not giving you that place, you get used to just keeping your emotions inside and not really being able to express them.
And you take it out on the other kids.
Taking out on other children or whoever is around you.
And how long did that go on through your preteens, teens, and adolescent year? How long did that go on?
Until I was, I think, around 15, more or less.
So I'm still trying to fathom how you go from this person to Dr. Kathy. Like these sound like two opposite persons.
I think that's the beautiful thing about growth. and transformation
Mm,
and that journey, and being able to realize that who you were is not who you are now, and your
powerful.
path does not your I'm sorry, your past does not define who you are in your future. And I think a lot of times we hold ourselves to the degree of, well, this is who I am. It's not who you are. If you want to change, you can change.
So what made you start changing? Where was it
That it click.
that I need to stop being this hurt person, that I need to grow from this, that I need to become a change in this world? Where did it
That's
click?
a really good question. For me, so after all of that, I think the biggest thing that dawns on me when you ask that question is being pregnant at 16. Like, so
At 16.
at 16. So going back to being raised in a physically abusive household, emotionally, just all type of physical of abuse. Let's just call it that.
Right.
Um, you grow up with a lot of suppressed feelings and feeling like you're misunderstood in a lot of areas. So what does this do as a young lady when she doesn't feel comforted or loved or cared for in her household? It translates into, let me find that love elsewhere. And so here comes someone. At the time I was a cutter. So I was cutting. I would cut to the point.
I met a lot of and I believe it was from reading. They said cutters. The reason why they cut themselves is that they want to feel the pain,
want to feel,
but they're numb. So that is true from what I read
Can you
about it.
imagine being physically abused or emotionally abused or sexually abused? At some point you have to, we call it disassociation
From pain.
in therapy, where we disassociate from our body's experience and we go into a whole other reality.
Wow.
And so how this translates into present day is that we become numb to those feelings, those emotions, those hurts, those pains, because we don't want to feel.
Right.
We don't want to feel. Feeling means I hurt. And so the brain doesn't recognize that it's bad or good. It just knows, well, I don't want to feel. And so it just numbs out everything altogether.
And it calls you to cut yourself to try to find that hurt, to try to find that pain.
Try to find an outlet.
And how long did that go?
I did it for about 2 years, I want to say. And so I went on the bus one day, and my daughter's father, who's the same one that I got pregnant by at 16, he noticed he sat next to me on the bus for the very first time. And he noticed, he's like, hey, how you doing? I'm so-and-so. And I'm like, okay. And then he just started talking to me. And one day he grabbed my hand after probably sitting on the bus for me for like 3-4 days straight. He grabbed my hand and he's like, what's this? And I'm like, nothing. And I tried to hide it. And he immediately picked up on it. And he says, I'm going to check your wrist every single day. I'm going to check your entire body every single day until you finally stop doing this.
So let's talk about that. So you're telling me at that time, for 2 years, for almost 2 years, you're cutting yourself and no one realized you were cutting? You were cutting yourself beside this one individual? So you felt like no one seen you?
No one seen me. He saw me.
Wow. So that pulled you towards him?
Oh, yeah.
Understood.
Yep.
Okay.
Pulled me towards him. And as a young lady who didn't really feel like she had that fatherly presence at the time, that masculine energy and love and attention.
He was your everything.
And care, because he was sitting there trying to save me from me. That made me feel like, wow, I'm special. I'm important. And so naturally I gravitated to this individual.
And how did that relationship, what blossomed out of that?
So before it blossomed into something, it looked like a lot of sneaking around, having sex at 14, losing my virginity to this individual at a very, very young age.
Right.
Like, when you have a daughter, like, imagine, right?
And I hope she's listening.
I have a daughter, and she's 12, so I can't even imagine her being in a position where she is with a boy that she's
sneaking out,
and she's sneaking out. I can't even fathom the idea.
But that came from what you said. There was no communication between you and your parents, because it was my way or the highway.
And I think going back to that point as well is I think a lot of times we as parents we make the mistake of, well, this is the way that I choose to discipline my child, but then we see that it's not working. And instead of trying to figure out other things, we go to extreme measures of that same thing that is just not working.
Insanity.
Insanity, doing the same
Insanity.
thing over and again,
And it's not
expecting a
working.
different result.
Correct.
But instead, we go to the extremes of it. So now, if I beat his ass a certain way, now I'm going to beat his ass even more or even harder. I'm going to try different. If I use the rod one time, I use the belt this time.
I'm gonna use a vase. I'm gonna use whatever. I'm gonna catch whatever
I'm
in
gonna
front.
burn them next time,
Right,
and so
right.
it just goes to the highest extreme. But it's the same form
It's
of
not helping.
abuse
It's
or
not
the
helping.
same form of discipline, and it's not helping. And so that's really where we go wrong at. Instead of saying, you know what, let me change my approach entirely.
So let me ask you this, because as I'm listening to your history, how did he take you getting pregnant? That's like I know that took him over the deep end. At 16, you're living under his roof. He's already irritated and frustrated with some of your so-called actions, as he called it. And here is his daughter at 16 telling him, I'm pregnant.
Yeah.
So how did that conversation?
Ironically, eventually, some things had translated, and it led to me being kicked out of my home.
Wow.
And I was around 15, 16, got kicked out of the home, and I ended up in foster care temporarily. And so his family, my child's father, his family actually took me in and took guardianship over me.
They took guardianship over you?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. And so now here I am at 16, pregnant,
living with your boyfriend family who took guardianship over you. Mm-hmm. That's God was with you.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
He was watching over you at that time. Because you could have been in the homeless shelter. You could have been what? So did your parents give up their fight for you?
They didn't.
They didn't even fight for you.
They didn't want me back in the house. They left me.
How did that make you feel in that moment? They
left me at the juvenile detention center, and they never came to pick me up. And they actually told the judge the one time they did come, they was like, "We don't want her back here." And so
how did that make you feel to be abandoned by you? Because that's abandonment. Abandonment.
It is abandonment.
So how did you feel when they abandoned you?
Rejected, hurt, left, misunderstood, unimportant.
Wow.
Belittled, small, unworthy.
I could picture a small 16-year-old girl in front of a juvenile center crying. That's what I see. Mm-hmm. Were you crying?
Everything.
Distraught.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
How did you come back from that?
At the time I didn't understand my faith in God and how powerful He is, and also being able to understand who I am. I didn't value any of that. So at the time, it didn't even matter at that specific time. But I didn't realize how important my spirituality was to me until I had my child. So here I am pregnant. My child passed away. I gave birth 9 months.
9 months?
9 months pregnant. My son ended up pushing him out. He ended up with meconium aspiration. As I'm pushing him out, they realized his umbilical cord got wrapped around his neck.
My God.
And he swallowed his poop. And so that causes the meconium aspiration.
My God.
Which resulted in his death. He couldn't sustain after, being born, and he just couldn't breathe on his own.
And you're 16 at this time, experiencing the death of your firstborn, your son. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I can only imagine that they even had you go through the process of naming him, going through the paperwork and whatnot.
Oh yeah. Wow. He's actually buried at the cemetery. So of course, I gave birth to him. He lived 4 hours. And so here I am, 16, just lost my son. I'm still in high school at this time. I'm in a opportunity high school. It was called, I went to Hagley Institute, and then I went to the MAC as well. But I graduated from, oh my goodness, I forget the name now, but because it was just so many high schools. It was definitely an opportunity. Mm-hmm. But nonetheless.
MacArthur?
No. Mm-mm.
Okay.
It'll come to me.
Okay.
I'll remember. But yeah, so here I am, still in high school, trying to graduate because I just had a baby, and I'm like, all right, well, I got to get this done. So that same day that I had my baby, and he passed away. I took everything off and I left the hospital.
You left the hospital.
Oh yeah, I left the hospital.
So they did not release you.
No, I left. I took everything off.
And where did you go?
I left. I had someone drive me back home, and I just said, "What am I here for?" So I went back. I was with my daughter's father.
So let me ask you this: during these dark times, were you ever passive suicide? Were you ever suicidal? Did you ever think about taking your life?
Absolutely.
Because that's just a lot on a young woman to be going through.
Yeah, I had multiple suicidal attempts.
So you have tried to.
Mhm. Yeah, I just wasn't successful, and so I feel like at that point, and it was one of the instances. I tried with pills. I tried with everything. And it just wasn't successful. But I think the one that was the most impactful to my life specifically was I got into the middle of like an ongoing traffic highway.
Seriously, oncoming high.
And just got in there and nothing hit me.
God had his hand. He had his hand around you and protect you from the oncoming cars.
And so I'm pretty sure a lot of us have been in a position where we are hopeless.
We have.
And we don't feel like there's a way out. And things just get so dark, and that's the best way that I can describe it.
We have.
Things were so dark at the time where it's like, I don't see where there's light out of this situation.
You know what I like to say? I like to tell people, during your darkest time, that's when the sun break. That's when the light come out. The sun don't come out at 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning. It waits till it's that pitch black. Then you see the rays in the sun. So I like to tell people, just hold on, and you will see that light.
Yeah.
That's when the breakthrough happened.
Yeah. But during that moment, we don't
you lose
think that there's a light. We don't even think the light exists.
It exists because your shadow left you.
Yeah.
You don't even have a shadow to talk to.
That's right.
During those dark times, your shadow is not even around. So you lose your son. What happens next?
So at this point, after my failed suicidal attempt, I realized something must be protecting me. And being that I had lost my son at the time, I was like, okay, well, he's my angel. Maybe he felt like I needed to be here for a greater purpose.
Wow.
So I said, you know what, we just gonna get through this. That's when I held on to my faith more than ever. And I really held on close to God because at the time, that's all I had. And I remember saying 3 simple words to myself over and over again until I believed them one day. And it was, this too shall pass. And this too shall pass. And I'll sit there and cry and be like, this too shall pass. The pain was so daunting and unbearable that I had nothing else to say. I couldn't even pray. But this too shall pass just kept resonating to me over and over again. And that was really what saved me. It's just programming my brain to believing that this is all temporary. Nothing is going to be forever. And a lot of times when we get stuck in those dark moments, we do feel like it's forever. We think that our circumstances are going to be everlasting.
Right.
It can't be further from the truth. Everything that we're experiencing is temporary.
Yeah, it shall pass. So now, at 17, 18, you graduate high school. Is it at that time you felt like, okay, I lost my son, this too shall pass? That's when you grit your teeth and had the fortitude to make a change in this world?
No.
When did it? So enlighten me. I'm still.
No, I'm still not there yet.
Yeah, so
I'm still not there yet.
So where are you right now?
So at 16, after that happened, I went back. I was in school already, but I said, you know what? Let me just finish school. Grab my high school diploma, enrolled in college, and here I am still grieving. But I needed something to keep myself busy, and a lot of times we do that too.
Distraction.
Suppress our emotions. We find a distraction. Sometimes it's a healthy distraction. Sometimes it's an unhealthy distraction, being drugs or alcohol, whatever it is.
But it is a distraction.
Hopefully it's a healthy one.
Right.
And at least, you can kind of see, well, this is where, even if it's pain that you're going through, at least you're doing something productive with that pain. And that's what I chose to do. And for me, that was school. And by this time, I'm pregnant again. Something completely unplanned. And I said, you know what, I'm going to hold on to God more than ever. And long story short, at 5.5 months pregnant, I'm going to an OBGYN appointment. They do an ultrasound and they said that my daughter was going to have an enlarged heart.
Jesus.
And her heart was so big that it was compressing one of her lungs. And so they were unsure as to whether or not she would be able to withstand the delivery or the birthing process or to breathe on her own. So I'm like, great, here I am again.
Second time.
And at this point, I'm like really holding on to my faith. Like I'm still grieving. I'm 17. I'm still grieving. I'm in college. I'm still trying to figure out how to navigate that last loss, and now trying to prepare myself for another one.
At 5 months.
At 5.5 months pregnant, and the doctor says, "Do you want to get an abortion?" And I said, "No," because why would I want to decide whether my child lives or die? And I leave it in God's hands because, like I said, at this point, I'm super into my faith.
Into your faith.
And I believed and trusted in God that He will make a way no matter what. So that's exactly what I did. And needless to say, my daughter did not make it.
Jeez.
She could not withstand the surgery. So here I am finding myself in the same position that I was in less than a year ago.
So within 18 months, you lose two child, a son and a daughter.
Mm-hmm.
My God.
Yeah.
That'll take any woman into the deep end.
Absolutely. And so for anyone, it could be traumatizing. It could be life-changing. It could be discouraging, to say the least.
Right.
But it was something that I had to really, once again.
Besides God, and I don't want to say, because God is everything. Mm-hmm. Did you have anybody to lean on? Anyone, any family?
At the time, I did have a therapist.
Okay.
And that therapist was my therapist throughout my pregnancy with my son.
Okay.
And I'll say her name because I'm always thankful to her. And her name is Dr. Marie Guma. And she was always there from the very beginning. I remember when I lost my son, she had recently discharged me because she had to move places. She took me to lunch, which is, at the time, it may have not been allowed. I don't know. But she did. And it helped save my life. She showed that she cared about me.
Right. Outside the profession.
Outside of the therapeutic
outside
world.
the profession.
And it was still professional because she was
Correct.
Still creating that space, but it was just like, hey,
I care for you.
I
care for you.
You're not just a client.
Right.
I still care for you. You're an individual. And I'll never forget how she made me feel. And like I said, I always knew I wanted to be a therapist. So naturally, I was like, exactly how she made me feel, I want to make sure that I can replicate that or duplicate it in some way and create this impact that she made in my life into the world.
So now we're at, how old are you at this time now?
17.
17. You lost 2 children.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you come back from that?
Once again, a lot of prayer, a lot of faith.
God was deeply rooted in you. In those moments.
God was the driver of my life. Is the driver of my life.
Powerful.
There was no way that I could have done any of it without Him. I wouldn't be here.
Glory be to God.
I would not be here.
Glory be to God.
And I think that is one of the most important things that we can do for ourselves is, and it doesn't have to be religion, right? Because there's a misconception between, well, I have to go to church and I have to do. You don't have to go to church to believe. You can have your spirituality, your relationship with God is unique to you and your needs and how you connect. And so the greatest thing that we can do for ourselves is find a way to connect with our higher power, because connection with Him means connection within yourself. And you learn to understand yourself on a deeper level, from a different perspective. You learn how to heal yourself.
Right.
And it's God that's giving you. He's the source. He's the energy. He's the
I like to tell people He's the source of all resources.
That's
He
right.
is the source.
That's right.
You go to the source. You don't go to the resources. You go to the source.
Amen. Mm-hmm.
So I truly understand that position. Mm-hmm. So now let's move forward a little bit, because you do end up having a beautiful daughter. Mm-hmm. How did that come about?
So after I decided I'm not having no more kids.
The opposite, completely the opposite.
I was like, I'm not having no more kids. I'm done. I can't go through this again. There's absolutely no way I'm going to put myself in a position to go through this again. And I had a daughter, just got pregnant. Same father, all of them. Still living with him at the time, and end up getting pregnant. Um, Luckily for me, actually, one of the ultrasounds, and I'll tell you how great God is. One of the ultrasounds, they tell me she's gonna have a cleft lip, and we might have to do surgery. So cleft lip is when they're like,
Yeah, I know it.
you know.
Yeah.
And so we might have to do surgery. I'm like, gosh, I can't just have nothing. Like there's always something.
Right,
God.
right.
And so I'm like, but you know what? I'm not gonna give it power. I'm gonna pray. I know that God's gonna make a way. And so thankfully, I had a beautiful, healthy baby girl. She is literally 3 for 1. Her name is Charm because the third time was a charm.
Okay.
And she's such a beautiful blessing. She's makes up for the two that not makes up for it in the actual sense, but her personality is 4-3. Like she's
Understood.
So strong-minded.
Understood.
She's confident. She's
Understood.
Driven. You can't tell her nothing about herself. You can't tell her nothing, period.
So in those moments, like when you said I would never have a child, in those moments, did you ever thought you would have a child?
No.
Did at any moment in time, did you feel like it just wasn't meant for you to have a child?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I think that just goes to show that a lot of us go through so many different obstacles in life.
Trials and tribulations.
Yeah, we feel like, well, this ain't for me. But you can't exit yourself out like that, because who are you to say that something is not for you?
Powerful.
You've already been limited yourself, and I like to think that if God is the source and the energy and the creator, then He gives me the power and the strength to do everything, then I am not limitless. I am limitless. I'm not with limitations other than those that are self-imposed, limitations. But other than that, God is the end all be all.
So now you have a child, you're in school. How were you able to juggle the two? Because here you are going to school to be a doctor, which is almost knowing that you're signing up for at least 8 years, 10 years, sometimes 12 years. Mm-hmm. Where did you find that will to be dedicated for that commitment?
It was tunnel vision. It was like, you know what you want. Mm-hmm. This is what it's going to take. And you're not allowing anything to get in your way of that. And I think a lot of times it's easy for us to have a goal and then make excuses as to why we can't accomplish those goals, going back to those self-imposed limitations, or even better, or worse rather, but the limitations that others have imposed on us, like people that are belittling us, belittling our abilities, telling us that you can't do this, you won't be nothing. A lot of us have heard those words.
Of course.
And so those words that can stem from childhood, from the very same people that we trusted to guide us and protect us and encourage us, being our parents sometimes, we get the most criticism from. And so those words that are hurtful, that you stupid, you ain't never gonna be nothing, right. You keep this up, that's not empowering. Those voices become louder and louder and louder, and they follow us through adulthood. So eventually we start believing those things. And so sometimes when we hear those voices in our heads, they're not our voices. They're the voices of the people that initially had planted that seed. So
if you had to tell a young girl that is watching right now, a young boy, how do they channel that, tune that out? If they were hearing it for constantly throughout their childhood years up until their adult years, what would you tell a child that is listening to you right now? How do they tune that out? Those voices, because they live in your head rent free for a long time.
So as an adult, because as a child and you're going through ongoing verbal abuse, it's hard to be able to tune that out. Like, can you imagine waking up every day and then hearing those words? That's hurtful. It's hurtful. It can really make you want to not even be in that environment any longer.
So what would you tell a child to tune that out?
I would tell them that obviously we need to get you out of that environment.
Okay.
That's number one. But number two, if obviously that's not the case for everybody, but being able to recognize that you are worthy, you are special, knowing who you are, recognizing your strengths.
Words of affirmations.
Really giving yourself that sense of validation, yourself, because you're not getting it from anybody else. And life is not going to give it to you. Let's just be real.
It's not.
Like we don't always have encouraging friends that uplift us or uproot us and say, hey, it's going to be okay. So we have to be that for ourselves. We have to be that source because we are given that power by the source. So naturally, we have to be able to speak life into ourselves.
So when you were in foster care, is there anything that you would say needs to be changed about the foster care system, or did that help aid in the transition
I have
of
a
what?
lot to say about the foster care system. They don't, I feel like they treat you like a number. They don't necessarily say that they advocate towards your needs. A lot of these case managers or caseworkers are overbooked, overworked, and they don't have enough pay or resources. And so that translates into someone that is tired, and they don't really, I wouldn't say that they don't care, because you have some caseworkers that actually do. However, imagine you have 40 to 50 people, which is their typical caseload. 40 to 50 kids on a caseload that you got to check in with on a weekly basis, and you think things not going to slip through the cracks?
Right.
Absolutely not.
Right.
So yeah, I got a lot to say about the system, but it's easy to complain when you could be creating that change, and that's what I chose to do.
And you're creating the change right now.
That's what I chose to do. So
and
you got to be the change. It's not enough for us to sit there and complain about the things that are wrong with the system. You got to try to figure out how you can help it.
What advice do you have for doctors right now to help mental health for children coming from that path that you once lived? What advice would you tell them how to handle a fragile or insecure or broken individual?
So I think in our field specifically, we don't actually let's just be real, we don't work with that. We prefer not to work with the foster care population, because 9 times out of 10 they're from minority populations, hence being Medicaid. Medicaid itself doesn't pay as much as these commercial or private insurances do. And so I do think that it's important for providers to actually create some space on their caseloads, because yes, we got to make our money too. But realistically speaking, if we really want to create that change, we also have to at least dedicate maybe 5% of our caseload to helping the underprivileged or those minority populations. I don't think it's fair that we're just pouring into the rich and wealthy, or those that can actually afford insurance.
So do you think there's any equality?
Not at all in the healthcare system?
Yes.
No, absolutely not. No.
And you're voicing this
Certainly not.
Loudly and clearly.
Proudly. Proudly. So I obviously was on Medicaid for a really long time, and part of my life until I was probably 23. So I know what it feels like to be overlooked. And so I take Medicaid. Is it the entire caseload that I have? Absolutely not. But guess what? I have people that are private pay that pay me $200-300 an hour that make up for those clients where I only get paid $50 maybe for an hour from Medicaid. And so that's how I pour back into my community. That's how I pour back into my roots, because it's important that if we come from this population, that we're able to actually pour back to the very same place that we came from. And
you actually have a profession called Be the Change for Mental Health, correct?
Be the Change Mental Health.
Can you elaborate on that? What is that platform?
So Be the Change Mental Health is a private practice, and it focuses on providing mental health therapy, aka actual individual therapy, group therapy, family therapy, and psychiatric services to those individuals that are in need. Our specialty is trauma, so individuals who have experienced a high amount of trauma. I work a lot with women who want to rediscover their voice. I give a voice to the voiceless.
Yeah, I'm very passionate about that. A voice to the voiceless.
I love working with men. I work with a lot of men who also feel like they don't have a voice, and they need a soft place to land, because everywhere else the world is on
hard,
their shoulders.
concrete.
They carry a lot of weight on their backs, and they don't have a place to actually share their feelings. And so I love what I do, because I don't push medication on anyone. I actually try to incorporate a lot of my practices from a holistic perspective, and holistic just means mind, body, soul healing. So we will heal the mind by healing the body, healing the spirit. It's not just the mind, it's how are we nurturing ourselves
Right.
spiritually?
Right.
How are we taking care of our physical bodies? What are you eating? What are you feeding your body?
Right.
All these things matter. And then at the last resort, for whatever reason, if you feel like that's not enough, yeah, let's get you a psychiatric evaluation. But it's not the end all be all.
Dr. Kathy, I would love to continue, but I do have one last question. What does keeping it real mean to you?
Keeping it real means to me being your truest and most authentic self. Is being unapologetically you, not worrying about what anyone else thinks, because what you know about yourself is greater than what anyone else may believe or think of you. It's just being true to yourself.
And with this, we will end it. We thank you for having you on the show. Continue doing great work.
Thank you for having me.
That would be all for Keep Concrete, Keeping It Real.
I've been praying to the Lord like holy. I've been praying to the Lord like hold me. Drowning on my pain in a cup of codeine. Rolling on the joint, I'm puffing on some OG. Thinking about the time staring at the rolling. I'm going big, gotta get another trophy. I ain't thinking about the same, that's the old me. Need a team like Parker Ginobili, holy. Ain't on you. You got people out here waiting on you. I've been breaking my back, trying to get that. They gon' act like we cool, but they weren't that. I was dealing with it all on my own. Breaking my back, trying to get that. They gon' act like we cool, but they weren't that. I was dealing with it all on my own. Breaking my heart again as you go. We'll get some.